Hey, Happy New Year! I'm Elisa, I'm the Half Asian Tarot Queen, and I'm posting actually a couple of readings today. So I did on New Year's Day, just a daily reading, and that one was, it was a little harsh, but it's just a one-day reading, but it didn't seem like, the note that I wanted to end the transition to the new year on. So I'm doing also a reading. I did one for the year, an annual reading for the whole year, which gave a little bit more perspective on what's going on, because clearly, all the readings leading up towards the end of the year, we're speaking to a lot of big shifts that were going on, harsh truths that were coming to the surface, that were really triggering some big changes, which is overall a positive thing. But in the moment, it can be difficult. So, and then when I did the annual reading, yeah, I'll put a link to that at the end here, because it was really interesting, because we clearly are on the at the beginning of a new era. And so I thought I'm going to do one for the whole decade, because this is a whole new decade. It's a whole new era. So I'm pulling out my New Era Elements Tarot, which I just recently got reunited with my decks. And I've had this one for a while, but it seems particularly appropriate today. So I'm doing some new decks. I have also got the Wild Unknown Tarot, which seems pretty appropriate for stepping into a new era. I'm doing the Gateway Oracle, which this one is particularly meaningful to me, but we are stepping into the gateway of a new era, so this seems really appropriate. And then last but not least, the Mystical Shaman Oracle. For this is a deck that I really connect with, and there's a lot of really deep wisdom that I think I've gotten out of this oracle. So that one seems like a good one for looking at a long-term perspective on a whole decade. So exciting. I'm going to start with the Wild Unknown, and I'm going to get some overall energies. Oh my gosh. Overall energies for the reading, but when I pull the deck out, the card on the bottom is the World. How appropriate is that? Yeah, I would definitely go back and look at the other New Year's readings, because clearly there's some really big shifts that are afoot. I can tell you, in my own life, that's definitely true. There's an overall realignment, I think, that's happening in the collective consciousness at the moment, and it's a beautiful thing, but it can be a lot to wade through, So, so if you're new to this channel, thanks for joining. Happy New Year. Just a word that the videos on this channel are arranged in a slightly less than ordinary fashion, in the sense that they're arranged according to, oh my gosh, wow, storyline. They're not arranged according to date or zodiac sign. All the readings are timeless, and I try to thread them together according to storylines. So I've said in other videos, it kind of reminds me of a daytime soap opera, in a sense that there's like these mini storylines that are constantly evolving, and then sometimes they intersect and climax in these interesting ways, but very interesting. So I guess I got 4 here. There's a video on the main page of the channel that kind of explains that, if you're interested in exploring that further. But I'm going to return now to the reading. So I pulled an extra as far as overall energy. So interesting. And these are definitely some themes that have been coming up a lot And it does seem like we are in the there actually is a video called Changing of the Guard, but we're in the midst of a, you know, of a changeover into a new decade and a new era. And so there's a lot of perspective, long range perspective, that I think people are contemplating. And you know, this is sparking a lot of change. So overall energies, we have the 10 of Pentacles. So this is a card of prosperity, abundance, family. And there there is a thread that really resonates with this card on the channel. It's called Dynasty, and it's kind of the story of this, this King of Pentacles that was kind of, you know, really working through a lot, you know, in a thread called Phoenix. But he's kind of going through this ascension right now into an emperor, you know, and it's sort of the birth of a dynasty. So that's definitely a thread that's been recurring on the channel. Then we have the Eight of Cups, the Five of Cups, and the Fool. So it's interesting because this is a longer range reading for a whole decade, but a lot of these themes did kind of emerge in the annual reading too, that were kind of at the beginning of a new chapter, you know. So it's like we see this dynasty here, this an overall energy, but then right next to it we have the Eight of Cups, which is like walking away from, you know, something that no longer serves you and something that you've invested a lot into. And it's right next to this Five of Cups, which, you know, there's a lot of sadness and regret about having to do this, you know, because there was a lot of invested in that, you know. But so these two energies are flanked by the dynasty, this dynasty card and this Fool card. And it's interesting because these cards are both like in black and white, and they're kind of sad, you know, but then they're flanked by these full color energies, you know. One is like a foundation for ultimate happiness and fulfillment, and one is the Fool, which is kind of stepping out into the unknown and just taking a leap of faith, you know. So it's almost like this is kind of like the ante that we have to pay at the door in order to step into these new energies. We have to let go. We have to let go of the past. It's interesting how this just totally flows into this card. We have to let go of the past to make room for this new era. And there's some loss associated with that, you know. So I'm gonna go into the new era elements and see if we can get some more clarity about what's going on. So just gonna pull some more cards to get some general energies, because yeah, it is exciting. We are starting a new era, and it's interesting to see what this era is gonna look like, you know. All right, a bunch of cards just flew out, so it's coming along pretty fast. I love how this deck shuffles. It's a really flowing deck, and I love this. This deck is very. It's kind of like sepia toned, but it's also just it's like very kind of, I don't want to say earthly because it's not, you know, favoring the earth signs, but it's very grounded, you know. So it's just like we have, like, for example, the Star Child deck, which is very metaphysical and very, you know, upper chakra, but I feel like this one is much more rooted to the earth and actual, like, you know, the images are like real people, and kind of depict real circumstances, you know. So it's very 3D and grounded. Okay, so we have success. Yeah, so you can see this is, it doesn't have like the pentacles, it has that little downward facing triangle. So this would be the Six of Pentacles in a normal deck, but it has a slightly different meaning. So in this deck, it's a card of success. And so it shows these 6 mountaineers, and they're climbing this mountain, and so it's just like they've figured out how to work together and come into balance with each other, to work together towards a common goal. So that's kind of beautiful. I mean, in a traditional deck, it's a card of giving and receiving. So it's kind of taking that concept and in the context of sort of cooperation towards a common goal, which is pretty cool. Like I said, this deck is like very grounded, which is pretty cool. Then we have the Three of Air, which in this deck is grief, and it shows like someone, you know, with a syringe and a little heartbreak here, you know. And this is a card of heartbreak and just having to face harsh truths, which is definitely a theme that was coming up in the annual reading. And then we have the Mother of Air, which is the Queen of Swords. So this is a woman who's just faced some really difficult circumstances, but has like come out on top, and you know, has gained wisdom from her experience. And so she's kind of she's now able to kind of rise above those circumstances, you know, because she is wiser from the experience. So it's interesting, like, you know, it's like there's this success and balance that comes from having to face these harsh truths, you know, and emerging on the other side of that wiser and stronger, you know. So that makes sense, you know. Over the course of a decade, there's like many lessons to be learned, but ultimately coming out wiser and stronger on the other side. Then we have the Three of, it would be Pentacles, work. So this is a card, it shows these bees working together, and it's just sort of like laying a foundation for something is how it is in the traditional deck. But in this card, it kind of describes sort of being confronted with limitations, but then figuring out how to work with that and like build upon that, which again is a very grounded message. You know, taking these very metaphysical concepts, but then applying them to like real life situations. And then we have the Strength card, which, you know, it signifies a lion, but in this card, you know, it has this lion with a little cub, so it's like a tamed, you know, he's like, his strength has been sort of tamed, you know, and with the love of his little cub there. So that's interesting. And then we have the what would be the Ten of Swords, and in this card, it's a destruction card. So it's about the meaning of this card is about again, you know, having to reach the end of a certain paradigm of living, and having to actually face some difficult truths and accept a new reality, you know. So it's really interesting. It's like there's a lot of wisdom and experience that's coming online, you know, and kind of wisdom from your own like inner knowledge, in terms of like, it's these two just kind of fell on top of each other, but just coming into balance and command of your own emotions and your own heart, and you know, to step into your power, and then working together and building a foundation, you know, to work around your limitations, and then coming out the other end as like a leader, you know, but having to embrace a new paradigm for how things work. So really interesting messages here. And I think that speaks a lot to the transition that's happening in the annual reading. And it's talking about coming into balance with your own personal journey and your own truth, and having to adapt and change course in order to honor that, you know. So this is very, very interesting, because it really speaks to sort of building new foundations after having to face not only those truths, but face your own limitations, and then and your own emotions, and your, you know, and building a new foundation based on a new paradigm with the knowledge that's gained from that experience. So it's a really beautiful journey for a decade. I'm going to pull 3 cards of guidance to see if we can get some more clarity about how we might move forward into this new decade. But it looks like a lot of really important lessons being learned, and the foundation for not only a dynasty, but kind of being a lead, you know, a leadership role in your own life, and building a foundation not only for yourself, but for other people. So I'm gonna pull one more. Oops. All right. Okay. So we got the 7 of Swords. This came out in a reading last week, and so this can be a card of deception. And we have the Four of Cups, which can be a card of sort of resistance. And then we have the High Priestess, which is interesting, because this is sort of an evolution from these two things, you know, where it's just sort of like, these are energies that kind of block success. You know, you're not being honest with yourself about who you are and what you want, and this creates a blockage, you know. Or on the other end of the spectrum, you know, what you want is being offered to you, but you're not open to receiving it, you know. So these are two energies that can really block success. And it's interesting because those fell over this deception fell over this, which is sort of like exploring your limitations, and like trying to figure out a balance so that you can like grow beyond that. And one of the, you know, main ways that people do this is by sort of deceiving themselves, you know, about what their truth is. And then we have grief and strength, which is kind of like two opposite ends of the spectrum, where this is just like total loss and sadness and heartbreak, and this is kind of coming into command of your emotions and harnessing the power of them, you know. And then we have this card of resistance, you know, which is kind of like what happens, you know, when you aren't in command of your emotions, when you are in a state of heartbreak. It's you know, you're resisting the blessings that are coming to you, you know. And part of that is because, you know, you haven't learned to be in command of your emotions, and so there's this blockage. There's a resistance to the flow that's coming to you from the universe. So really important lessons to learn so that you can step into your power, which this high priestess is tapped into the collective consciousness and has the power to manifest. So very interesting that this falls right over this Queen of Swords, this wise queen who's learned these lessons and's been through all of this and has had to face. Sorry, I just got interrupted by my mom, which is ironic that that would happen right during this. So yes, this woman's learned all these difficult lessons and had to face some very harsh truths and adjust her paradigm so that she could come into her power and be in the flow of all that is and manifest her wishes. So these are like some really powerful lessons to take forward, and just like kind of learning that, the journey is all an internal journey, and figuring out, self-created blockages that block us from this. It's a really interesting message for a decade, for sure. So, on that note, I'm going to go to the Gateway Oracle card, see if there's any wisdom to take through this gateway into this next decade. Oops. Okay, well, the wisdom is following your bliss. My soul sings with joy. So yeah, it seems like these messages here are very, well, there's a lot of wisdom here, but also just talking about, when you are following your bliss, you're just in the flow with all that is. And I think, that seems to be the critical message that's coming through, how to stay in that energy and so that you can follow your bliss, because at the end of the day, like, that's kind of what we all aspire to, so that we can reach our highest potential. Okay, so one more from the Mystical Shaman Oracle, which is also very wise and very grounded. I think it goes really well with the New Era Elements Tarot deck. But I'm just going to pull one from here. This is one of my very favoriteest decks. Just very wise. And we'll see what we get from here. Oh. All right. I am pull 2. Lightning and Beauty Way. Which is really interesting because I feel like this really goes with the message that I was just talking about. So lightning is just sort of like this strike of inspiration. It's just like you've been struck by some sort of insight from the universe. And sometimes that can be a harsh truth, which is interesting because there's a lot of harsh truths that are coming through with the messages for the transition into 2020. But just a spark of inspiration, that's coming from the universe. And Beauty Way, this is achieving that, achieving that, being in flow with all that is. And so, I think when you're not in alignment, like, the universe will serve you this truth to kind of help you along your way so that you can come into this flow, So I think these really important lessons that are being delivered now is, to be honest with yourself about who you are and what you want, and be open to receiving this wisdom from the universe, and don't resist it, stay in the flow. That's how we're going to achieve ultimate happiness and abundance, which we all kind of aspire towards. So, very wise messages. And I'll leave you with that. And Happy New Year. We'll be back soon with more messages.